Okay, for those of you that I don't know, my name is Pat Ciano, and I'm the leadership team coordinator for NAMI Baldwin. And we have with us tonight, is it Doctor or is it just Joy? I can't remember. You're muted.
It's just Joy.
Okay, I couldn't remember, so I wanted to make sure I, respected any titles. Joy All, who is works with USA Continuing Education, and Jason Brooks also works with Continuing Education, and they're going to give us an overview of what has transpired in the past that none of us know anything about with CIT work that they were involved with. And then also, if you guys could give us names of people you've worked with or the localities and stuff so that we in Baldwin County can understand exactly who you're talking about, that would be great. And then we'll go into what the Crisis Intervention Team Conference was about in Pittsburgh that I attended. Just for your information, I also got my CIT coordinator 3-year certification. So I am now officially a CIT trained coordinator, whatever that means. And I'm not sure yet what that means in Baldwin County. We're hoping that we can begin the discussion tonight to pull this concept together and figure out how we put things together correctly. Okay, without further ado, Joy, go ahead, and if you can fill folks in on the background and then bring us up to date with the current stuff.
Okay, so let me first of all clarify for Jason. He actually works in the College of Allied Health. So we partner across the university. So we work together, but he's not in the area of continuing education. Okay. He actually works, and I'll let him tell you like what he does with the College of Allied Health. But we asked him to join our project to work with the emergency medical technicians. So let me just back up a little bit. Actually, we first started doing mental health first aid training and crisis intervention team training when it was funded through the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. So out of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, there was a very large medical settlement that was divided among the 4 states, and each state received projects that were across different areas of mental health, being one of them. So we were tasked with trying to increase resiliency in Mobile and Baldwin counties. And so the project I worked for at the time, we do that. One of the things we identified was training people to recognize the signs and symptoms of mental illness, and then having a plan for how they would respond to that. So we began to run mental health first aid trainings. We ran them in the Mobile County Public School System and in the Baldwin County Public School System. And then we also began to look at first responders and how to work with first responders. So we brought a group from Mobile and Baldwin County to a CIT conference in California to learn about it. Unfortunately, when we first went, they were not real encouraging because of Alabama's laws. They were like, "You're from Alabama, you are never going to get this going in Alabama." But we met back with representatives from lots of different agencies when we returned, and with Judge Russell, who was the probate judge at the time. And basically what we decided was, even if the state and Alta Point didn't have resources available, officers were still going to receive calls. And so there was benefit in training whether or not there was actually a response center, because the calls weren't going to go away. So we ran training programs that were funded through that Deepwater Horizon oil spill grant for a few years. Unfortunately, when we sought extension funding, we ran into an obstacle with Alta Point. They were really trying to take grant funds to pay for services they already had. And so all of the partners kind of backed out and it fell apart. And what we began to try to do was figure out, how do we come back to this? So we began to advocate with the state senators and state representatives, and represented at different meetings, even bringing it to the governor's office. And eventually we were asked to put together a proposal for something unique, not something that's being done necessarily everywhere else in the country, but something that would be new, that we could take kind of a lead in. And so I met with the officers that were teaching in the program, that were working in it, and we tried to look at, what do we need? Well, Baldwin County actually was kind of our, I guess you would say, our test environment, in that it is a rural community, there's rural communities, there's limited resources as compared to Mobile County, but we had cooperation there that we didn't have in other places. So what we identified is that although we would like to have co-responders and we would like to have a crisis response center, there was always going to be a need for people in the community, in their existing roles, to be able to respond and work as a team to address a mental health crisis. So we developed a concept of expanding training, not just to law enforcement, but also to emergency service technicians and to emergency department personnel. And originally we had hoped also to school counselors, kind of hitting those touch points in the community that people might encounter somebody in crisis. And unfortunately, when the original grant proposal was for a significantly larger amount, when it finally got put forward, it was for a lesser amount. So we received funding beginning in August to start training law enforcement, emergency, to develop, so law enforcement with the existing national curriculum, and then to develop a corresponding curriculum for emergency medical technicians and for emergency department personnel. So that is where Jason comes in, is that we began to reach out to representatives to say that we're passionate about this topic, that wanted to be helpful, that also had experience. So Jason can tell you his background, but we wanted everyone that was part of this project. I know one of Pat's concerns is about making sure we have people that have some lived experience. And so the people that work in the project, that lead the project, are all people that have worked either in their fields or they have worked in settings that involve working with people in crisis. So my background, I work in continuing education now, but my background is that I was an officer for 20 years, married to an officer. My brother's an officer. They're all CIT. So it's kind of the thing. On the flip side of my family, they're all teachers. So I'm really the black sheep by being the officer and not a school teacher. But and then we our PI now, our principal investigator, that's the head of our grant, is a clinician, a mental health clinician that comes with years of experience working in emergency departments, doing emergency assessments and treatments, and also in numerous clinical settings. So we will be working kind of on focusing more on the training piece, but we want to stress that we do realize, Pat and I were having this conversation today, that training is only one piece of it. The training is what we are funded to do. But we do understand that CIT is about community partnership. I am also a certified CIT coordinator, and we do understand that we're going to have to bring advocates to the table. We're going to have to bring mental health professionals, healthcare services. And I feel like we've made tremendous strides. I think that there was just so much that had to be made that it doesn't seem like it, I'm sure, for people oftentimes, but I know that when we first started doing training, we were having terrible problems in some of the local hospitals with them rejecting people in crisis and calling the police to remove them from the ERs. And so we began,
they still won't accept them.
yeah, we began training officers though in about EMTALA. And what we found is when officers can speak the talk and they can go back and say, oh, no, wait a minute. Under EMTALA, you're required to stabilize this person. This is federal law. Then the hospitals back down because then they go, oh, wait, these people know. And so that's where the training is so critical, is that most officers, like when I first started this, we brought in a CIT consultant to help us. She's actually sits on the board of CIT International. And when she came, I was sharing with her some of the challenges we had locally. And she said, what do you mean the hospitals aren't seeing them? And I said, explain. And she said, oh, no, you need EMTALA. Let me send you the language. This is what you need. You need to be, promoting this and teaching this. And it has made a difference where people know it and they know how to use it. And in this whole process, during this whole time, is when infirmary decided that they were going to shut down their inpatient unit, and they notified all law enforcement when they did that all ERs were receiving centers. Well, just because they decided to notify law enforcement of that didn't really mean that those ERs were equipped to set up and receive the people that were being brought to them. So we've also experienced a lot of frustration for the emergency department side. I wasn't trained for this. I don't know how to do this. I don't know where to make referrals. So that's one of the reasons we identified them as a group to train, with hopes that when you got somebody to the ER, you might actually make some progress with it. And I don't think it's that they don't care. I think it's that they're used to treating people that are bleeding out or that are, their heart is stopping. And so they're looking at physical life-threatening emergencies, and they're not seeing and understanding that this is also a life-threatening emergency, oftentimes, especially when it's been brought to them. And so it's trying to train them in that. During the process, we have worked with all kinds of groups. We've worked with AltaPoint, we've worked with NAMI, and Pat was asking me today, and the NAMI panels have always changed for us. So I was able to give her a couple of names that I knew off the top of my head. I was in a training program all day long today on something not related to this, on software, and I haven't had a chance to look up others, but the ones that I knew off the top of my head, so they're part of Mobile NAMI. That's who the state put us in touch with. It may have been because Baldwin County's NAMI was not active at the time, but we always had representatives on the panel that were from Baldwin County. I live in Baldwin County. Jason lives in Baldwin County. We both work in Mobile, but we live in Baldwin County, have lived in Baldwin County for a while. My kids went through Baldwin County schools. So I do understand that Baldwin County is not the same as Mobile, and that there are even different areas within Baldwin County, and that varies, what resources you might have in Orange Beach might be very different than what you have in the rural central part of the county, which might be very different than what you have up in the northern part of the county. So we are wanting to work with any group that is willing to work together to try to put together a comprehensive response. Our funding is not for putting together like a behavioral crisis unit that you can drop like an assessment center or anything like that. Our funding is for the training. But of course, we realize that's only one piece of it. If you've read NAMI, if you've read CIT International material, they talk about like the 5-legged stool. You need all of the components, all of the legs. And we realize we're only one of the legs, but that's the leg we're funded for. And I think it's the leg we can help the most with. However, the resources in the community have also changed, and so it's important to have updates and training. So one of the things we're going to be looking at and working with the state on is how to have the refresher trainings, and that using the university's resources to offer those refresher trainings, because like when we first started doing the training, there was no behavioral health crisis center in Mobile. Now there is a behavioral crisis health center. So people need to know and stay up to date on what resources are available and how to best use them. So that's kind of maybe a little bit more than you wanted to know, but I know these are all kinds of questions Pat has asked me over since we met. So I want to make sure and share those with y'all. Jason, you want to talk a little bit about yourself?
Can I hold you guys just a second, because I know Phyllis has to leave and go to another meeting at 7, and I want to make sure that we respect the fact that she's on. Phyllis, for just so you both know, is the mother of the young man that was killed at the end of August in Bay Minette in a regular traffic stop. And she is very interested in the crisis intervention work that's going on and so forth and so on, as a family member who has experienced the worst scenario. Okay, so I just want to make sure that she gets a chance to ask or put forward any thoughts that she has. Go ahead, Phyllis.
Okay, good evening, everyone. As Pat stated, my son Otis Fritz Jr. was killed. Actually, it was August 20th, so it's been a month. And Otis suffered from mental illness, but he was doing well. He wasn't having any problems, but what we're thinking we don't know what was going through his mind that may have triggered when that officer went beyond just wanting to give him a ticket and then asking him to step outside the car and all these different things that could have triggered something else. Back when Otis was first diagnosed, well, even before he was diagnosed, when we were trying to get help and trying to figure out what was going on with him, we went through probate to have him involuntary committed. Well, with that process, he was treated like a criminal. We couldn't take him to the court. The officers came to pick him up, and he like, why are you here? So they would take him to the court, to the jail, keep him at the jail. Then we learned all of this during the process with him. And we did this. We had him involuntarily committed 3 times because he was in, when this happened, he was in college. It was his last semester of his senior year, and he started having these issues. So as a young man whose life was going great, he didn't know what was going on. So he was fighting the fact that he needed medication. We didn't know. Initially, we thought it was drugs, but then when they would take him to the hospital, his system was clean. So we went through this process for years, and then we had him involuntarily committed several times. And the last time we did, he was tased. They came to pick him up. He didn't want to go with them because he's like, I haven't done anything wrong. So they tased him. And when he hit the ground, at that point, my husband and I said, never again. We will not call them because he's not a criminal. We're just trying to get help. So then if this is what happened we don't know what went on. So, but I had been involved, had joined NOMNI, and I'm passionate about trying to do something because from our experience, the way it is the lack of training and how they are treated like criminals when it's an illness. I just saw so many things happening prior to this major thing that happened. For him from a traffic stop to death, it just doesn't even make sense. Mm-hmm. So this is where I am. As for my background, I have actually I have a degree in criminal justice. And then I went on to get in education. I have a master's in education. I have a master's in special education. I have a doctorate in education with a focus on curriculum and instruction and diversity studies. So
And she's
That-
retired recently from the Baldwin Board of Education.
Yes, I retired from Baldwin County Board of Education as a central office administrator in 2012. And then in 2013, I started working with the State Department of Education as a retired state employee. I recently retired from that, but has been asked to come back under contract to do some work with the State Department.
Okay. See, I didn't even know all that. I've just known Phyllis French's name, Dr. Phyllis French, for years because I worked as a teacher in high school for 4 or 5 years. I don't even know that Phyllis, that we've ever actually seen each other in person.
No, but I was over like with curriculum and instruction for the school system, over the elementary department for curriculum and instruction. So my name was on a lot of things you received, and I remember, and your name, I remember seeing your name.
Yes,
and since for the last year we've been connecting through emails and different things.
Yes, because we ran into each other last year at the walk in Daphne, the Out of the Darkness walk, and compare notes at that time about our sons and their problems, their issues. Okay, well, yeah, thank you, Phyllis. I just wanted to make sure that we got everything from you before, you had to leave.
Yes, and I want to be a part of this. I truly want to be a part of it. I was really passionate about it before this. I didn't know that it was going to come knocking at my door like this.
Right.
But I was aware something needed to be done based on our experience.
Right.
So.
Right.
Yeah, I think that the process, that's one of the things that was shocking to me when I moved to Alabama, is that the laws in other states are very different, and the process here is a lot harder to accomplish, which makes the system a lot less accessible. But my understanding from I had somebody come in from the Alabama Department Mental Health that gave a big presentation on the history, and my understanding is that it's in response to a consent decree where Alabama was kind of on the other side, where they kind of had people committed and threw away the key and had all the abuses the other way. And so now their laws have kind of done a complete flip. But I don't think anybody feels good about the existing processes as they stand. I think that's definitely something to work towards, is trying to improve them.
Right.
Dr. French, you have my condolences. I just wanted to jump in there real quick. If you know how to go in there and get direct messages, I sent you a message because I sent a story in to Dr. Rashad Ritchie on Indisputable. So they can kind of zoom in here. But I sent you a direct message. It probably comes even better coming from you.
Oh, okay. I'll try to I'm on my phone. I'll try to pull it up.
Okay, so
I can give it a Pat, and Pat know how to get in contact with you. I'll just send it to her.
Yeah, I'll share your contact information on the phone. Before you leave, Phyllis, I want to make sure we get Jason in real quick because Jason actually down in Foley Way, yay! And Joy in the Fort area. So go ahead, Jason.
No, I apologize for the t-shirt. My kids are at jiu-jitsu, and that's why I'm in my car. But no, I've been a paramedic since 1996. I've worked in Baldwin County since 1997, so I've been here for quite a long time. So being a paramedic, we are trained in recognizing signs and symptoms of behavioral crisis and things of that nature. We don't necessarily have like the de-escalation techniques, but we can, we at least have the education to go, yes, this person is not having a heart attack, they're not having a stroke, they're not bleeding to death, but this is still a medical emergency. And it's very sad to hear that story because I worked in Bay Minette for a long time as a paramedic. And it just seems like the training from the police department, and I've worked with a lot of police officers, have friends that are police officers, but a long time ago, I don't want to use the phrase back in my day, but I guess so. If they even thought there was something remotely medical to this, they called us out before they did anything and said, "Hey, can you check this person out? And is this a medical problem? You know, is this like a patient who's a diabetic? Have they been drinking?" And quite a few times, officers are like, "Do you think they're having, you know, is this a mental health issue?" And there was many times that we did get called out, and these patients were, you know, have bipolar disorder, they were schizophrenic, they were just, some of them were just severely depressed, some were suicidal. And like I was sharing with Joy, the problem that we had was we knew that they needed help. So we would bring them to the ER, and the ER would then get ugly with us. "Why are you bringing them here? This isn't a psych hospital." I'm like, "I can't leave them on scene. They're suicidal." And then the patients, if they called back again, they're like, "Can you guys take me someplace else? I don't want to go to that hospital because they were terrible to me." And it put us kind of in a catch-22 because we knew these people needed help, but there was just nowhere to go besides, I remember when Thomas Hospital had the harbor, and we could take them to the harbor there, and then with Mobile Infirmary when they had their behavioral unit. But that was the crux that we had with it, was we knew when people were having a mental health crisis, and the patients did too. But a lot of times family members would call and they're like, "I don't need the ambulance, you know, I don't want to go with you guys." And I'm like, "But you have to, you know, we've got no other way to do this." So we were actually, EMS got caught in the middle on so many things. Like I told Joy, we had said years ago, there needs to be something like this. So because, you know, we even saw back in 2002, whatever, that this problem was only going to grow, is that this is a sort of a medical gray area. And again, that they're not, I mean, it's still a life threat. And EMS, we've always regarded it as a life threat. We teach it as a life threat, that yes, this patient is not having, you know, like chest pain or anything like that, but this is still a crisis that needs to be solved. And that's why I told Joy, I think EMS is probably, this is kind of a natural fit for us because we've already been responding to these calls. So it's really just tweaking the system, giving people more training, and of course, giving the emergency departments training, because again, that was the problem we had. We would bring them in and then they would say, "Why'd you bring me here?" You know, but I teach in the College of Allied Health. I'm a senior instructor. I've been there almost 11 years now. I have a doctorate in education, specializing in adult education. I did my doctoral research on PTSD among first responders because a lot of my colleagues, I'm blessed that it never hit me, but a lot of the colleagues that I worked with over the years, including my mentor, suffered sort of in silence from it. So that's kind of where, not to say that this isn't a passion, but being on the other side and seeing first responders who refuse to say anything and get sicker and sicker and sicker because the culture was so toxic. If you said something, you were weak and you couldn't do your job and you just need to go do something else. So it was kind of like a self-perpetuating cycle. But, you know, back to the point, again, I think EMS is just, I think this is just a way that we can, it's a natural fit for us because again, we've already been responding. We educate the students in the EMS program at all levels of EMT, advanced EMT, and paramedic on behavioral crises. And I could see us, you know, being able to expand this more on the educational side. So when we have a new EMT or a new paramedic, not only are they, you know, trained with the signs and symptoms of everything else, but they learn more about mental health crises and how to deal with them, I think, more effectively. So I think that's kind of what excites me, because this is something that we should have had a long time ago, because they just don't fit into that box. But we still, from the EMS side, we still regard it as a medical emergency because we know it is. We know what happens if that person who is suicidal doesn't get help. Well, we end up finding them, or a loved one ends up finding them. Or like in the case with the incident in Bay Minette, you know, you're treating them like a criminal and you're triggering them. They don't know what's going on. They don't understand it. All they know is that somebody's coming at them with cuffs or whatever. And but again, it made me a little sad, really sad to hear that, just because I worked a lot in Bay Minette, as I said earlier, and really all around Baldwin County. Anytime any of the police officers, and that was city or that was county deputies, if they thought there was even a sliver of a medical problem, they would always call us out and say, "Hey, check these people out. What do we need to do?" And they actually sought our assistance. Go, "Hey, we're not trained in this. what do you think they need to do? It's like, well, they need to go to the hospital, because that was the only route, was through the emergency room. And then we'd get them in there and they would yell at us. Then they would treat the patient like garbage. And again, it would come back to, we'd get called out again. And like, well, I don't want to go there. Well, this is the only place we can take you. We can't leave you on scene. You've told me you want to kill yourself. Or you need help. So let us help you. And silly us, we thought if we got them to the ER that they could get them, there was usually a psychiatrist or psychologist on call, and that would be the gateway to the help that they needed. We found out it's not. And like you were saying, Alabama's laws went from lock them up, throw away the key, to I've brought patients in who were having, like generalized anxiety disorders and things of that nature. And before we could even get the stretcher put back in, the patient has signed a refusal and they're walking out, and they're doing that because the ER was so bad to them that they're just like, I don't want this, So, but that's my story.
Great. Thank you, Jason. Absolutely. I believe that, any first responders, but particularly people in the medical field. And I know that the police officers would love to have EMTs and people who know what they're doing to help them figure out what is going on. So let me just real quick fill you in on the conference. I was just so impressed with the CIT conference that I went to in Pittsburgh at the end of August. On Sunday, I was there and got my certification, which you can get online, by the way, and I did not know you could get your certification online until after I was there. But nonetheless, I went a day early and got my certification. So I'm good to go for at least 3 years. Anybody else that wants to get their certification, I can give you the information and you can, do it online. It's kind of pricey, but otherwise it's okay. I've got the book and everything, and I plan to work on it. But the highlights that I came away with was, number one, there is no CIT team without NAMI. I was shocked because I've heard of CIT all over and I just thought it was just CIT for police officers, CIT for, you know what I mean? And NAMI was just kind of like supportive of CIT work. But CIT International says there is no CIT without NAMI. So we're going to help working with Joy and Jason and building on what they have already done and building, since they've got the training going. That's great. We don't have to worry about the training part. But we do want to try to figure out how to put together a team of people in Baldwin County who care from different sections of the county. In other words, from county government, from the sheriff's office, from different municipalities that can and want to participate. Foley has a wonderful CIT team, and thank goodness that we had former Chief Wilson, who is now Public Safety Director, David Wilson, to help spearhead that to begin with, and is very supportive of CIT work. In my opinion, it's the only decent, real CIT team we have in the county, because they know what they're doing. They proudly will tell you their CIT, and they will proudly tell you what they do and why they do it, and they're passionate about it. I even had a call in, because I do the hotline for NAMI Baldwin, and I had a call in from someone in Orange Beach who said that the police officers took the person that they called the police department to ask for CIT. They came out and picked up the person and dropped them off in Foley, because the only place they knew to take the person was either Huntsville or Pensacola. They didn't even know about the crisis and behavioral unit, the new one. So, and this is Orange Beach is an area which I understood had a crisis intervention team very similar to Foley. So, and I have been told that in Fairhope, they don't have enough money for a crisis intervention team. All they have is people who have had sensitivity training or maybe mental health first aid, which is not, by the way, if people tell you they are crisis intervention officers, ask them where they got their training. Because I asked a young man in Fairhope that, and he told me he went to the mental health first aid. And I said, well, that's great. That's mental health first aid. And I'm so glad you did, but that's not CIT. We can't call things something when it's not that. okay? And we need to be real clear about what that is. And so that's why I wanted to start our fall education meetings off with this topic, because I think it's so critical to our work as NAMI in the county. And so glad that Joy has gotten the money, because we're not good at getting grants yet. So the fact that she's already got the money and is, has had training and will do the training, that's wonderful. So we don't have to worry about that. That's kind of going to go on independent. But I really do want to figure out how who needs to be at the table? How do we get them to the table? Because everybody knows that people listen to certain people and they won't listen to other people. In other words, I can't just go up and knock on the probate judge's door and say, we need you to be part of this team. I mean, I can do it, but I don't know that he would come. You know what I mean? Just because I don't have a relationship with him. So we just need to kind of brainstorm all of that and try to figure out how to pull together a good, real crisis intervention team over the next year, while Joy and Jason and whoever else is doing the training part, so that we can, you know what I mean, build on what's already happened, but flesh it out so that it's a real crisis intervention team in the county, and that people understand what a crisis intervention team does, and we can get this thing going. Because I think we'll get buy-in. Once people understand what we're talking about. I think a lot of people still think crisis intervention is only for the police officers, that it's not for anybody else. You know what I mean? Get them trained and they'll take care of it. Well, I happen to think that those police officers would love to have support from the community, support from other areas, people in their corner, so to speak, you know what I mean, to help interpret and to help bridge those divides that exist. Okay. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And I just want to make sure that any of you that do want to, yes, Phyllis, I know you have to leave, sweetie. So thank you so much for being on. And I've got you down, and I've got Dr. Boykin down as interested in being on the CIT team. And so what I'd like to do is try to set up what I call as an organizing meeting, where we're just beginning to brainstorm. It's not going to be, we're not going to call it a CIT team until it actually is a CIT team.
Okay.
We're going to start doing an organizing and inviting Joy and Jason, if they can, either by Zoom or in person. But we'll start that in the beginning of October. I'll try to pick out a date, that we can get together. And if people want to do Zoom, that's fine. Or you want to do in person, or you want to do a combination, that's fine too.
Okay, look forward to hearing from you. I'm sorry I have to leave.
Thank you, sweetie. I appreciate you being on with this as much as you have been. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, there was somebody else trying to get back on. I've let her in twice and it keeps dropping off. Does anybody know who Brenda is? I don't know. Anybody else have comments or questions?
Brenda is been participating in FaithNet in Baldwin County.
Oh,
and
great.
So she just got the message and probably came and sat in.
Okay, but she comes in and then I let her in and then it drops off. I don't know what's going on. She may be having difficulties, is what I'm saying.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Anybody
And
else comments or questions or?
So when will the training start?
So we will begin with the law enforcement training, because that is a national curriculum that's already set up. So we will start with that this fall. And then we will work on the development of the curriculum for the EMTs and the emergency department personnel. So that will transpire over the next year and a half as we work through what that curriculum will look like and test it. One of the things, Pat, on what you were saying about trying to put together a community advisory board for crisis response. At the conference, I attended a session on Maine, and I think this is really what from Maine, they're very rural there. And so one of the things that they stressed was the importance of this group in troubleshooting issues, and I think that's where it came in. So they would identify something that different stakeholders brought to the table. So if law enforcement brought to the table, this is a problem, or advocates brought to the table, this is a problem, or mental health providers brought it to the table, this is what we're encountering, then the group would work to troubleshoot how can we make a difference with that. And some of those things were as simple as changing call screens, and coming up with some scripts that they could put in on call screens. And they're able to connect. They have better resources, but they're able to connect and say, like on their call screen, if they respond here, that this is like the crisis counselor that is already assigned this case. This is who they could be calling and getting information from and talking with and trying to get on the scene. So they can start that response before they ever arrive, because it might take them an hour or hour and a half to get there because of how spread out they are in their response. But that was just like one example that they were giving. So I think that by having a community advisory board that addresses these response issues, then you can kind of take those pain points and then try to see, like, at least how can we work through them. And that's been the struggle, I think, for law enforcement. The reason Foley's been so successful is actually we're the group that, under the original grant from the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, I contacted Chief Wilson and I said, hey, look, we've got this funding. You want to go to this conference and learn about this? And he said, well, I can't, but I'm going to send somebody, and that's Sergeant Sutherland. And so Chuck and I have been working together on this for a long time now. But what Chuck has had the benefit of is that he has complete buy-in. He has buy-in from his chief, who's now the director of public safety. He has buy-in from their municipal government. Like, they're even seeking to train all of their municipal employees, like in a mental health kind of awareness program. Most communities here have not had that level of buy-in. I'm not saying we can't get that level of buy-in, but they got there through steps, and part of it is that because they have that buy-in, they actually track their calls and they actually collect data, which makes it then easier to turn around and get more when they can produce the data to support that. So that data is so critical in getting there. And but I just think, I mean, I knew this before going to listen to the main one. It was very encouraging to listen to that group at the conference, because they do have, I mean, they have detours that take an hour and a half to drive around if they have a road that's out, because there are so few roads in certain parts of their state that the detour might be an hour and a half, so I felt like in some ways there's a lot we can relate to. They do have more resources, but they have significant funding cuts. So that was the other thing they tried to work through, is how does this work, even with the funding cuts that they have faced. I think that some of the same people that you're looking to put together, we're, by our grant, going to be putting together an advisory board on the training. So I have a meeting on Thursday, and we're working on our stakeholder list, and so I think that if we can be hitting people from multiple sides and kind of, bringing the issue to them over and over again, it will make a difference. The state seems to have a little bit more commitment.
Can I just ask you a question on that real quick? When you're putting together your committee for the training, where are you drawing people from?
Well, because the training is from both counties, and it will, and actually, one of the conversations with Johnny is about providing it to this whole southern region. But the advisory board will contain representatives from both sides. It has all.
And that's fine. Can I just put a request in now to have meetings both in Mobile and then Baldwin, because if you don't show people that you're willing to have meetings in their county, they will not feel part of it.
Oh yeah, we used to, when we were running it before, we ran, actually we met lots of times at the, either at the Fairhope campus, or we did trainings. And we've done trainings in Loxley and in Robertsdale and in Foley. Pretty much anywhere that will host us, we'll go. We'll try.
I know about the trainings. I'm talking about the committee, your advisory.
No, I agree. We had several of our meetings, like we met with HOSMAC, when we were looking at this renewal grant, we were trying to get that. We held numerous meetings over, at the Fairhope campus and trying to make that. And so, certainly, like I said, Jason and I live on this side of the bay. It's not a problem
Right,
for
right.
us to do that.
Good. So the other thing I need you to think about in between now and the time, or right after your meeting, because you and I can get our heads together next week, is what is the difference between your advisory committee and a CIT advisory committee for the county? You know what I'm saying? We don't have to discuss that tonight, but that's just something that I personally would like to know the difference in, right? Because people will ask, because people have limited time, you know what I mean? And so we don't want to duplicate meetings, but we also, when we start meetings, we want to make sure we're clear about what that meeting, what that group is and what they're not, right? That makes sense?
No, I agree. I think you're absolutely right. People are limited. It may be that they need to overlap, in some ways because of that. So yeah, we'll talk, certainly. Yeah.
And I'm sure Johnny would probably have some input in that also. Just for those of you who don't know who I'm talking about, Johnny Hollingsworth, who just received an award at the Pittsburgh conference, along with Sheriff Petway in Jefferson County for their work on CIT, has been recently hired under funding from the Alabama Department of Mental Health to work as the CIT state coordinator for NAMI. So, and he's from the police department in Huntsville, and Huntsville Police Department also won an award. We had 3 Alabama awards given at this Pittsburgh National Conference. And Sam Cochran, who is one of the originators of the CIT International and who was there, received a national award from NAMI back when I first went to my first convention, where he blew me away at that convention and made a mark, and always does make a mark with whoever he's around. But he said, when he told me, he says, when he first started working with Alabama and people in Huntsville, he said, y'all will never get CIT in Alabama. He just shook his head. He just could not believe that Alabama now got 3 awards at the conference. So I think that we are making progress. It is uneven, just as anything that you start new is uneven development. And we just want to make sure that we build on what Joy and Jason and their team has done in the past. And we help develop that even bigger and better over in Baldwin County, and that we try to help facilitate and bring together as many of those partners as we can. And I'll be talking to some people behind the scenes to try to find out exactly who those key people are. I suspect HOSMAC is one of them, but I don't have a relationship with HOSMAC. So, and I know that you guys know him, but I don't know whether either one of you have a relationship with him. So that's what I'm looking for. And you both know what I'm talking about, because people will listen to people who they have a relationship with. They will be nice to the rest of us, and they will agree with the rest of us, but you will never know what's going on between their ears unless you know what I mean? Unless you know who they listen to, who they talk with, who their confidant, who their person is, right? So those are the things that I want to try to find out behind the scenes, so that when we get started, we're hoping to, bring in the people that need to be there, that are thoughtful, that understand the importance of having this work done and done correctly from the beginning, and who are committed to it for the long term, right? We don't want people just coming in that, will be here for this year and that'll be it. And, great, you guys have a great time. But
I think a key partner too that we need to be thinking about, and unfortunately this is all to point, but it's how to bring about, like Mobile has a behavioral crisis center, and that behavioral crisis center, a crisis center, or it can be done in other states, it's done through ERs or other things, is a critical component. Like the last session I attended at the conference, it's a guy I've heard speak at multiple conferences, but it's Nick Margiotta. He was talking about how, and he always says this, if it takes, you're not going to have an effective crisis response team until it takes less time, or at least equal time, that an officer can handle a mental health call through the crisis system than it takes for them to go to jail. That's the only way that it's going to actually work. And the problem, and that what that requires, is a robust crisis center or processing capacity, even if it's through an emergency department. And otherwise, if they go and they have to sit for hours and wait for hours, or it takes them hours to get somebody to come to the scene, then they're not, even if we train them, then they're not going to go back to that once it fails for them. So that's somebody to be thinking about, Pat, is how to, and that's also is also a funding issue. I know for AltaPoint, that's a big part of it. It's not like they don't care, that's not what I'm saying, but they have limited resources, and then they go, well, we've got one in Mobile. Well, if you're an hour and a half away in Orange Beach and you're in crisis, that's not necessarily the most ideal situation.
no, we know, but we also know that funding was very hard to get in the first place, and that Mobile is supposed to cover southeastern Mississippi, southwestern Alabama, even over to Pensacola. Is what I've been told, that crisis behavioral unit is supposed to cover that big a territory. So, and I don't get it, because it seems to me like it's probably at capacity just dealing with Mobile without any of the other areas, right? And exactly, for the people to come from other areas, it's going to take 40 forevers to get there. And police officers aren't going to be able to have the time and, spend the effort to do that. That's why I think people in the South, in the southern part of the county, bring everybody to Foley, because, they've got a good crisis intervention team, and they can just kind of turn them over to them and then, wash their hands and leave. So we've got some obvious, very real obstacles to, to deal with in Baldwin County. And who knows if we're going to be able to deal with them or not, right? Because that's what obstacles are. You have to figure out if you go through them, around them, over them, with them, or whatever. But I think that we can be further down the road than we are, is I guess my point. And help everybody in the process learn what crisis intervention is versus what mental health first aid is. I'm not against mental health first aid, but let's call what mental health first aid is. Let's call it that. Let's don't, misname it, and have people thinking that we have some big crisis response when we don't. Right.
So Joy,
yeah, go ahead.
Joy, when you have the classes for the police officer, I think Johnny was telling us at the NAMI conference that it would have to pay for their officers' time. But is that the case? They don't have to pay to participate in the training?
So that's what the grant funding does, is it enables us to offer the training at no cost to the department or greatly reduced cost. That's been the problem, is that most departments currently are struggling in two ways. They're struggling with staffing. So one of the issues, and that's something that Johnny and I've been talking about, is one of the issues is, can I pull somebody from my department for 40 hours? So we've been talking about, could we do the training 5 or 6 Fridays in a row, for example, or Mondays in a row, or whatever, that way it's not not cutting their staff to like an unmanageable level, especially smaller departments. Like you get into your Summerdales and, your small towns, they cannot afford, when they only have 3 or 4 people that are in their department to begin with, to pull somebody for 40 hours. So that's one of the benefits the university has, is to be able to do some training in some different ways that other places can't do potentially. The other thing is the funding. And so when we ran out of funding before, that's why it wasn't that departments didn't feel it wasn't beneficial. Every department, every person that's ever taken the training felt it was helpful. The problem was, okay, I don't have training dollars. And so they just shift to where there is whatever's being currently funded, basically, in a lot of departments. And that varies with where federal streams are coming from of money and state streams of money. And so they don't go if it's not. And so yes, right now, they won't have to pay, but in the future, they're, unless we're able to find a way to make it sustainable, they will have to fund that. And that's a pretty extensive amount. When you're talking about, you want to train multiple people in your department with this, you're not trying to train one person. CIT doesn't follow a train the trainer model in the sense of sending somebody back to the department who can then just bring everybody else up to speed. They all have to go through the 40-hour training, because it feels very significant that they spend time with people who are living through mental illness or who are family members. They feel it's significant that they spend time doing the field trips and the site visits and all that. Did that answer your question?
Yes,
Patrice?
I just wanted to make sure if I went to the police chief or the council in Robertsdale and say that there's an opportunity for them to send someone to training, and it's not they don't have to pay for the training. I understand.
Yes,
about,
ma'am.
Okay. So that was my main concern, because I think sometimes, I don't know if the information doesn't get to them or it gets overlooked because they don't have the people to send. So, I just want people to be aware that it'll be coming up and it'll be available. And I'm sure you'll send out something, but sometimes a resident of that area can kind of push some buttons.
No, absolutely. What I can do is, once we have the training scheduled and stuff, I can also share that information with y'all, and you can advocate within your communities for your departments to send people.
That would be great. Yeah. Okay, well, it's almost 7:30. Dr. Boykin, are you on? And did you have any questions or comments?
Yes, I'm here. I don't have any questions or comments. I just want to take it in. And I do want to know, in addition to being involved in the community, I am a therapist at Alta Point. So I know how those different factors have worked with our organization.
Okay, you are. Okay, I did not realize you were at Alta Point. Great.
Yes.
Where do you practice? What office are you in?
Well, I was in the Fairhope office, and now I'm in the Bay Minette office.
Okay. Patrice, that's not the young lady that you were talking about, is it? Oh, okay. Well, good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good. Patrice had met somebody or knew somebody in the Bay Minette office, and I did not realize that was Dr. Boykin. So And I'm sure that you and Dr. French are friends as well, right?
Yes, I know Miss Phyllis.
Yes, that's what I thought. Okay, good. Good deal. Okay, any other last minute thoughts or? Okay, well, we're going to wrap up. Thank you so much, Joy. Thank you so much, Jason. And we will be in touch and we'll talk more about maybe getting together like some initial, people to kind of brainstorm and see what we need to do and where we want to go and how we fit with your, plans and so forth and so on. Okay. So
Sounds good. Thank you.
working
Enjoyed it.
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.
Enjoy.
Take-
Bye.
Good to meet
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Night.